Hi, and welcome back to the Empathic Leader podcast, where we talk all things empathy, emotional intelligence, and leadership. I am Dr. Melissa, and I'm so happy to have you here with me in this conversation today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and come along with me on this ride. If recent research is any indication, some of the lack of empathy both in the workplace and in our society is growing. So we need people like you to help me spearhead this cause, because we do not want to go into the future with less empathy than we have now. I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about toxic work environments. Here's another one of those words that we hear thrown around a lot, like psycho, like narcissist, like empathy. And the problem with not really defining these and just using the words is after a while, they no longer pack the power that they should, because we use them to define everything. We take a term like gaslighting, which means that you are lied to so much that you start to doubt your reality. And people just use it to apply to just run-of-the-mill lying, which isn't good, but it's not the same thing. And it lacks the same intensity. So let's start by actually defining what a toxic workplace is, because it's not a one-off thing. It's not the usual, the silly things you have to deal with people at work. For some place to be really toxic, it has to be long-standing, it has to be ongoing, and it has to actually take a toll on someone's mental or physical health over time. A truly toxic work environment can cause PTSD, it can cause depression, it can cause physical symptoms. That's not the same as dealing with the person who can't seem to figure out not to microwave fish every 2 or 3 weeks. It's a serious, serious thing, and we shouldn't just apply anything to it. Think about a toxic work environment as something that has to be ongoing for a long period of time, right? You end up with negative coping mechanisms just to be able to get by. Now, usually there is a history here, right? Even when we think about the big toxic leaders, right? The ones we think about like Hitler or Stalin, there were signs of what was going to happen before the really nasty stuff did. Same thing in a toxic workplace. You see things happening long before it really gets bad. So if you see any of these kinds of signs in a work environment, you're looking at the other people and everybody is beat down. Everybody's being forced into positions they don't want to be into, whether because it's against their morals and their ethics, or because there's a huge lack of work-life balance, or because they're just being told they have to do this because I said so. There's no autonomy. These are signs that this is a place that you maybe don't want to be in for a long period of time if you can help it. Toxic work environments are sustained, but they really aren't to be taken lightly because they can crush you over time. It's a nasty thing. So don't throw the word around lightly. And if you see it, don't take it lightly. The other thing is often in a toxic work environment, there's different parts that feed on each other. You might have like favored cliques and people that are ostracized outside of these cliques. You may weirdly have people that are employees that actually support this kind of behavior. I'm working with an institution now where the wrong behaviors are incentivized. Now, what do I mean by that? That means that because of the way this place is set up, they're actually rewarding people for bad behavior. If you want a real big example of this, go back to the housing crisis in 2006. Where people in these banks were being incentivized for writing bad loans, for getting people involved in mortgages who couldn't actually pay the money, for bringing people in over their heads. The people that were doing this were making money because of their organization, because of it. The toxicity was incentivized. Things feed into one another. It's usually not just the guy at the top's a jerk. It can be, but not always. A lot of times it's a lot more nuanced than that. So the other thing to keep in mind with these toxic leadership situations is because things feed into each other in that way, it's not always intentional behavior. One of the things I talk about a lot in my book is that you have to be aware of what your actions do to other people, right? Perspective taking, putting yourself in their shoes. If you have a leader who's just unaware of what's going on, you now have a toxic environment that's self-reinforcing just out of obliviousness. And it's not because this person's a bad person. We're not talking about a potential Stalin or a Hitler. We're just talking about someone who has their head in the sand and doesn't get it. Here's an example. I worked with a leader who called a super early morning meeting for their facility. It was a healthcare facility. So we're talking 3 shifts, right? Because people don't just get sick from 9 to 5. They show up at the hospital at all times. Well, this person called a super early morning meeting so that the third shifters could be there and the people could also come in early for their work. And this was scheduled 6 weeks in advance. People took care of daycare. People took care of their families. People that were third shift figured out how long they were going to stay there. All of this. And the night before, she canceled it because she wanted to be there for her kids' first day of school. Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem like a bad thing, right? Who doesn't want to be there for their kids? But she never stopped to think that all of these people might have wanted to be there for their kids too. And that they had made arrangements to be there with her. And then she was just like, oh, no, not doing it. This created a loss of morale. And some people left because of it, because of her blindness, because of her lack of awareness. And she was shocked. She was confused. She didn't understand. A lack of awareness can be just as damaging as maliciousness or negligence. So when we talk about this toxic workplace of umbrella, right, it's not necessarily going to be the boss that bangs on the desk and that is screaming and yelling at people and hiring and firing people. I mean, the kind of egregiousness that you see like in the movies. It could very well, and it probably is, someone who's actually a good person, but because they don't tap into their empathy first to begin to understand and connect with their people, they do things that really cut their own knees out from under them, and they don't even realize it. One question I get a lot is, can you work in a toxic work environment? You can. People do. I did. I had to stay in mine for almost 7 years before I could get out. But if you can, it is always better to get out. Make an escape plan. Even if you can't get out right away, start making the plan to be able to leave. Not only does this preserve your mental health and the fact that these kind of environments usually bleed over into every other aspect of your life, right? You have no weekend because you're spending all weekend long laying on the couch trying to get prepared for the next week of hell. You don't even get a decent commute in the morning because you're hoping that you would get into a wreck rather than get there. That's what I would do. I can remember it very clearly, wishing to get into a wreck so that I didn't have to go to work. It affects your relationships. It affects your energy. It affects your mental health. If you can, try to get out. Think of it this way. If you take a plant and you put it in hard dirt and you don't water it and you don't feed it, that plant might survive for a while, but eventually it's going to wither up. And that's exactly what happens to us as people. You've got to be able to nourish yourself in these environments. And if these environments are holding you back and holding you down, you can't do that. At least not from that environment. You're not going to blossom. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. But you're never going to be nurtured, and you're probably not going to flourish. And over time, people become bitter. They become angry. That's not the life anybody wants. 2 big signs of a toxic work environment. 2 signs that people miss all the time is to really keep an eye on the leadership and to pay attention to the culture. Talk about this in my book when I have the chapter on flags. And that episode's people really want to know. So we're going to be doing another episode on red flags, beige flags, and green flags. What are things people do right? But if you really want to know, what is this place going to be like? Don't just look at the people around you, but also pay really close attention to what's happening higher up. When you are a leader, you are always on stage. Someone is always watching what you're doing. And whether you want to or not, your actions trickle down. How do you instill trust as a leader? Trust is when words and actions align over time. That's what it is. If you're watching your leaders and their words and their actions do not align over time, there's a good indication that there could be some toxicity in this work environment. Here's another example. I used to work at an institution which was affiliated with a very popular sports team. Very popular. And they started doing very well. Well, one of the rules was you don't get to wear sports apparel to work. But suddenly when this team started winning, the executives did. They had their team logo ties and their team logo socks. And no one said a word to them about it. But had someone from housekeeping come in with a team logoed shirt, they would have been written up. What the leadership was saying and what they were doing over time did not align. They were exercising what's called executive privilege. They thought they didn't have to actually abide by the rules. And anybody who was watching close enough would have seen that this was just an example. They did this in all sorts of other places too. It's just that this was really obvious. Culture is the aligned values, norms, understandings within an organization. Now, the thing with culture is that it's created whether you mean to create it or not. It's just what happens. If you want to create a culture of empathy, if you want to create a culture of non-toxicity, you can do that. But if your words and actions over time are toxic and this is seeping down through the organization, it will become part of the culture, whether you want it to or not. Right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. One of my favorite Peter Drucker quotes. And there it is. So if you can watch the culture, see how people interact. How do people interact with customers? When they get edicts down from the top, are they actually following it or do they roll their eyes and think, oh God, here we go again? A really good place to watch for this is in interviews. Remember, when you're going in for interviews, yeah, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. If you walk in and one person seems to be beaten down or beating other people down, if people are interrupted, if you can just feel there's a lack of cohesion in the room, if you can feel that there may be a real cultural problem, the easiest way to get out of a toxic situation is not to get into it in the first place. And I know that seems like really harsh advice, but if you can just not be there, then you don't have to worry about getting out. The problem is, and I understand this because I was in it, sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes you have to take a toxic job, even when you can smell it walking in, even when you're like, oh, this is going to end badly. Sometimes you don't have a choice. So at least go in ready with your armor up, knowing that this is what you're walking into. So if you're stuck in this situation, what do? The more you can nourish yourself outside of work, the better. One of the big problems with these kind of organizations is that over time, you start to lose track of yourself. You forget who you are. You forget what your dreams are. You forget the things that you wanted to do because you're just beat into submission day after day. If you can do things to nourish yourself on the weekends, in the evenings, do it. Take back some of your control. There may be nothing you can do in your environment. If it's really, really toxic, going to HR might not help. It might make it worse. Going to the union might not help. It might make it worse. It depends how deep the toxicity goes and for how long it's been going on. So start to take your control back where you can. Start a podcast. Talk to people about this toxicity. Get the word out. Don't have anything to do with it at all. Go do painting. Go back to the artsy things maybe you used to like to do. Read books. Try not to do other things that are going to take away your sense of self. Things like addictions come out of these situations. Try to not get into that if you can help it at all. Well, I mean, obviously nobody wants to, but the things that are caused by these toxic work environments, don't let them take your power away from you. Hang on to the things that nourish you and start creating an escape plan. Even if it's no more than just, wow, I really like to do this. Well, if I could go back to school, I could do this. Well, even if I could sidestep laterally out, then maybe I could get enough energy to think of doing something else. I had never considered doing that, being a podcaster, being an author, being a speaker. Maybe now's my opportunity. Maybe I can take this garbage and turn it into gold. I've known a lot of people to do that. One final word on some of this. Some of these toxic work cultures have existed for a long, long time, years, generations. I'm happy to see that the younger generations are not willing to put up with this. And people have heard me talk about this before. I'm a Gen X. And unfortunately, a lot of Gen X people just kind of went into this. We were told if you just put in your time and do your work, that you'll rise up. And it didn't happen. In fact, just the opposite happened. We didn't have the same positives to our jobs that the generations before us had. And in fact, some of the positives that were there were taken away. Our loyalty wasn't taken as it should have been. And now our generation is kind of stuck. But the younger generations don't have to be. You guys are smarter about this. You're not willing to give up a work-life balance. You're not willing to throw everything away to go up the corporate ladder. And you are willing to move from job to job when you see this kind of bad behavior. And I'm really enheartened to see that. Because if enough people leave a toxic enough environment, that environment will fold. I know things are not necessarily easy right now. I know there's a lot of problems in the job market. I know that inflation is up. I know that as the younger generations come up, they're facing problems that a lot of us just didn't have to. But I think you guys really could be the ones to change the world and actually show what an empathic workplace could look like. And as you come up through the ranks, be the empathic leaders that I would like to see out there. Show everybody else the right way to do it. Don't take what you're given just because you're given it. Use your head, think independently, which these generations are very good at doing. And let's see if we can make the world a better place than what we walked into. Dr. Melissa here for The Empathic Leader. My book is out, The Empathic Leader, How EQ via Empathy Transforms Leadership for Better Profit, Productivity, and Innovation. I'd love to see you along for the ride, but no matter what, just be the change you want to see in the world. Be the empathic person. Show others how it's done.